sometimes you listen to some stuff, you go, oh my God, that's really clever metaphor. And then you remember, you go, no, this is literal, isn't it?
Hello, Kev.
Hey, Matt, how's it going?
I'm good, mate. So what we're going to talk about today is the mighty Iron Maiden. I think when I first met you, you were wearing an Iron Maiden T-shirt, I think.
That sounds very likely.
and I was probably wearing I remember I had the Clairvoyant T-shirt. So we were about 14, weren't we? 13, 14?
Exactly how we was, 13, 14.
And Maiden were kind of the band at the time for us, weren't they?
It was, yeah, absolutely. It was. I don't know how else to describe it. Like religious fervor. It was just sort of. It
was a cult, wasn't it, Maiden? It was a a culty thing. But at school there was like two types of music you could like. It was sort of Public Enemy and that sort of thing, which we did like.
Yeah.
Or Maiden and Guns N' Roses and Europe and things like that and Whitesnake. But I think Maiden. And then you had, exactly. And also we had, there were sort of the Megadeths and the Slayers for the sort of harder kids, which we sort of got into in the end. But I think for me, the second album I ever bought in my life was Peace of Mind. And it's, pretty much, after Guns N' Roses, then Iron Maiden, and it's pretty much stayed with me, and I still love them. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about each album one by one. So early stuff, got Soundhouse tapes, and then which was basically a demo tape that was pressed onto vinyl, and then straight onto Iron Maiden, the first album. Now recorded in 1980, I believe.
I think it might be recorded in 79. Didn't they record it at Christmas?
Christmas 79, released April 1980.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the punky early Maiden sound from the live shows. So if you ever see, I used to watch the 12 Wasted Years video religiously. And there was a 12 Wasted Years video in the Live After Death video. I used to watch them when I used to come home from school every night.
Yeah.
12 Wasted Years, there's footage of the original Maiden lineup with Paul Di'Anno singing. So we've got Paul Di'Anno on vocals, we've got Dennis Stratton on guitar, so it's pre-Adrian, alongside Clive Burr, Steve Harris and Dave Murray. This is, the real early stuff. This is where people often say it's like a punky sort of thing. I mean, it's got a lot of bangers on there. It's tracks they still play live. I mean, they still play. I mean, I think they've Running Free. They still play Phantom of the Opera, Iron Maiden. I mean, and they could also. I think they have done Charlotte the Harlot and Prowler. Remember Tomorrow on that. That was that first 4 albums tour we saw, Kev.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It's interesting actually with this album is that. Apparently, this is the album that apparently they really weren't happy with the sound of it. The guy that produced it apparently was a bit disinterested. He was a guy who'd done Sabbath and stuff before, and apparently the only reason they picked him is because they'd been through a couple of other producers, and then this guy they thought, well, he's so disinterested, we can bypass him and go straight to the engineer. But they felt they didn't really know what they were doing, and as I'm sure most Maiden fans will know, Steve Harris especially is not a fan of punk music. So the punky kind of like comparisons they hated, but I think that was actually something that really, made them stand out.
Well, there's a couple of things here. Di'Anno, as a frontman, didn't look like he didn't look like Coverdale or Dio. He looked completely different.
No, yeah,
that really made them stand out. He looked like he was like a punk guy fronting a metal band. But listening to the album, really from the earliest days, they're like you say, they have got that sort of punky, youthful energy. But some of it's, I mean, like Transylvania, Phantom of the Opera, a total prog.
Oh yeah,
really prog.
Yeah,
I mean, they're like, you listen to like Dio or Whitesnake, and then you put a Maiden record on, and the standard of musicianship and the complexity of the arrangement is so different.
Yeah.
So I mean, the only time you sort of see Flash playing in most metal bands of the era, I mean, like you had Randy Rhoads and stuff, but the arrangements weren't that complex. So, but in the lead playing was awesome and stuff. But it's not just the leads, and the lead instrument in Maiden is Steve Harris's bass.
Yeah, it's there all the way through, isn't it?
So, you listen to the all their catalogue, and the lead instrument is the vocals and the bass that lead, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say as well, I actually listened back to Iron Maiden. Well, I listened back to pretty much all of them in the last couple of days. The ones we're talking about today, and yeah, it was interesting that the formula was there on the first album, and every album, like up until the end of the 80s, I'd say, was just refining that formula. There isn't an album where they suddenly, veer off on a tangent. It was all very much like it was just getting better at doing what they did.
It was that they were progressive. I mean, they had their own sound, but they were also a progressive band because every album they did. And I love the whole thing of every Maiden album. They've got their own. Everyone's got a specific font and art style, and so the first album, like I say, it's that sort of. It's got Eddie on the front, and it's got the and then all the singles from it are also sort of plays on the same theme. Yeah. And like I say, it's I love it. It was the third album I ever bought. So I bought Peace of Mind, and I bought it from Western Fable, Tesco's on tape, on the Fame tape label.
Nice.
And I listened to it on holiday with my mum. My mum and dad took me away on a holiday to Torquay, I think, that year. And I remember listening to those two Maiden albums over and over again. It's great.
My way in was my sister let me Somewhere in Time, which blew my tiny mind. And then I went down the record shop and I brought Iron Maiden Killers it was like they were like cling filmed together in like a double pack. And I always remember, because I'm sure most people who know us know that myself and Matt grew up in the same hometown. There was the record shop that's not there anymore that I bought it home. I came out and there was a load of bikers. There used to be quite a few sort of bike organisations around. Yeah. And there was some bikes out, and one of them just kind of literally started like out of the film, just went, all right, what's in your bag? And I just pulled out this Maiden record, and he went, oh, good. Maybe Maiden saved my life. I don't know.
But it's a great. What do you think to Di'Anno singing?
I absolutely love Di'Anno singing. I think it's probably the reasons that Harris and all that don't particularly like the first album. Not the songs, but like the production and all that. But I just think it just works so well. It's really rough, and you can imagine, being in the pub, the sort of like the pub circuit they used to play. And hearing that stuff, that must have been pretty exciting.
Yeah, it must have been unbelievable to see him in an East End boozer.
Yeah,
to come on and do that. I mean, because watching the videos on 12 Years, and there's some on the live after. Well, I've got all the DVDs, and there's some footage of them live in a pub in 1979 or 80, and they were there. It was the same band. It was the same.
It was the same show.
It's basically the same idea.
Yeah,
it's sort of stadium filling genius.
Exactly.
In a pub.
Yeah, absolutely. Harris is still doing that.
Steve Harris, I have to say, this boy, he's a visionary. He was a man who could see a band in a pub and then take it to the stadium. And then he was lucky enough to meet Rod Smallwood, who was another gentleman who could see that vision and make it happen. I think that's so much of bands is someone having a vision. It's very much the same as Jimmy Page or Peter Grant, or people having that vision to make it happen. You know what I mean? Lars Ulrich's another example. These people aren't necessarily the best musicians, but they have vision and ideas. And these are the people who make interesting stuff happen. So I think we've done Iron Maiden now, haven't we? The first one.
We have.
Oh, why isn't Sanctuary on the album? That's bonkers.
Didn't they? I think it did get on some remaster or something like that, and then they reissued it again as the original.
I mean, why on earth wouldn't you put Sanctuary on there? I mean, there's a lot of great songs on this album, but I mean, Sanctuary is one of their best records, isn't it?
It's great. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay, so we're on to Killers. Still with Di'Anno again, but much better production from Martin Headmaster Birch.
It's really noticeable, the difference, isn't it? Really, it's a lot lusher.
Yeah, and especially on, when Ides of March kicks in. I mean, I love that song. And I remember when we saw them on that first 4 albums tour, when I hear the Ides of March, it still makes, and the same with Doctor by UFO, which Maiden always used for their intro. Hairs on my arm go like, I watched a video of them in Rio and I was struggling to hold back the tears. Just there's something about it. I don't know why. Ides of March, which I love, one of the best instrumentals they ever did. Wrathchild, great track with that bass intro. Murders in the Rue Morgue. What's your favourite on this one?
I actually Wrathchild because it's a hell of a groove. It just kicks in, man. It is interesting though that even though the album Iron Maiden is apparently the one that, you know, production wise they were least happy with, you know, at that time. Like I say, that the first album Iron Maiden is just like every single one of those tracks, like, pretty much is a classic.
Yeah.
Killers has some absolute classics on it, but there's a few ones that kind of like slip through the cracks and kind of a bit, you know, a bit filler.
Too. I mean, like you got Ides of March, Wrathchild, Murders in the Rue Morgue, all fantastic, and the title track Killers, but slightly weaker second half songwriting wise. It's that thing of you got your whole life to write your first album, second album's always hard to follow.
Well, apparently a lot of Killers was actually still written. It was still maybe this was like the you know, some of that stuff they were starting to get to the bottom of the barrel, as it were. You know what I mean? Not to be too harsh,
it's the second best of their early pub era, isn't it? So it's the tune.
And also the arrival of Smith.
Oh, who is? Yeah, of course. Adrian Smith is my favourite Maiden guitarist. But you know, I love Dave Murray as well.
I can't decide.
But yeah, they're both fantastic. Yeah, but the thing with Adrian, he also brought the songwriting. He's got a really good backing vocalist. Mm-hmm. He was a massive asset to the band, I think. And the thing we made, you can hum that. I remember when we were kids, we used to sit in bus stops and hum their guitar solos.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it. They were just as much a part of the song. They weren't like, you know, both Murray and Smith are so melodic. But it's like it's part of it. You know, it's part of the song. It's a composition. You know.
Yeah. So, and then when say you got a guitarist 10 years later who couldn't remember the guitar solos and just whittled all over the top of it, that would be a bit bad, wouldn't it?
It would be. Yeah, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
It'd be really bad if it happened. Okay, so we've done Killers. We're on to Bruce Dickinson's Arrival. So Di'Anno's gone. And we're on to Number of the Beast. And, you know, the thing with Number of the Beast is it's, I suppose, the arrival of the classic Maiden sound. Bruce is there. It's got the big singles on it. Like it's got the Children of the Damned. So there's the run of Children of the Damned, Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue, Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, and Hallowed Be Thy Name. They're all absolute classics. And you've got Invaders and Gangland, which aren't very good. They're not very good songs. I mean,
I know.
But they had Total Eclipse, which is an absolute banger. They didn't put on. God knows why they didn't put Total Eclipse on there, because it's like, you know, that's a stronger song than either Gangland or Invaders.
Yeah.
I'd say the thing to note about I love Clive Burr's drumming on this album. I think he's brilliant.
Clive Burr's awesome. And
he wasn't really sadly passed away, but he's a fantastic drummer.
Yeah.
Really brilliant drummer.
I don't think anybody kind of sort of debates who's the better drummer, because it was interesting actually. We'll move on to it.
Different. They were just different.
Yeah.
They're both Nico's brilliant as well. But
when Nico arrives, there's I don't know whether it's intentional or whether it's just the style or something like that, but I think Clive Burr totally set the blueprint, because
he's great.
If you told me it was Clive Burr playing on Peace of Mind, I'd just go, yeah, absolutely. They're kind of interchangeable, and I mean that in a good way.
No, he's a great drummer. So, what's your favourite from this one, Kev?
Hallowed Be Thy Name.
Hallowed Be Thy Name. I did love it. And to be honest, I got sick of it because it was just the end of the set.
Right, yeah.
For so long. And you know, whilst I do like it. I just you know, I prefer The Prisoner, and I love Children of the Damned.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
How much of a difference do you think to like the songwriting style did? Because let's face it, Bruce Dickinson, you know, technically is a much better singer than Di'Anno was. That his range is incredible, you know. And do you think how much of a difference do you think that made to like what they could do song-wise?
Yeah, I think, you know, by the sound of Bruce could sing anything, couldn't he? So yeah. I mean, Yeah, and there's he reminds you of Ian Gillan a lot on this album. He's that Child in Time, is it the Deep Purple song? I mean, I'm not a Deep Purple expert.
Right, yeah, don't know.
But he's got very much got a Ian Gillan thing going, and he's great. He's really great. So that's another absolute. We've got 3 classics in a row there. They're all brilliant.
Oh, unbelievable.
So this is the second album I bought next, The Mighty Peace of Mind.
Yeah.
Which I think this always reminds you of my mate Just and hanging out in his bedroom and listening to his friend of ours who could play bass like Steve Harris.
Basically,
What a gift, you know what I mean? Phenomenal. But his bass player just sounds like Steve Harris. That's his thing. So this is I think this is my favourite Maiden album.
I agree. But it's weird because it's I think it's my favourite, and yet it also contains possibly some of the worst songs they've done.
It's the trouble is it's got like To Tame a Land on there, hasn't it? Which is the blueprint for the later period, sort of Mother Russia and things like that. Which I'm not a massive. It's the what book Steve Harris been reading this week track at the end of the album.
It was it's when they got into. I'm just looking up here. Quest for Fire. I'm just going to look up the lyrics here quickly.
Sun and Steel's all right. Sun and Steel's a good track.
The opening verse. In a time when dinosaurs walked the earth, land was swamp and caves were home, and an age when prized possessions was fire, to search for landscapes men would roam. It's basically when the To Tame a Land and Quest for Fire are basically just not very good synopses of films that Steve's just watched.
The film stroke book Steve Harris. I think To Tame a Land's June, isn't it?
Yeah, but they couldn't call it June because they sent it to Frank Herbert and said, "Can we call it June, please?" And they got a reply that says, "Frank Herbert doesn't like rock music. Frank Herbert doesn't like, and especially not the sort of music that Iron Maiden make." So that was it. They had to call it To Tame a Land instead.
So Where Eagles Dare, fantastic drum intro, absolutely brilliant track. Revelations, there's a groove in that do do.
Yeah.
I love that bit. Flight of Icarus was Steve Harris's best bass lines.
Yeah.
Dial Your Boots On's fantastic track. The Trooper's probably their best song.
It's amazing.
It's the perfect heavy metal song. Still Life's great. It's Quest for Fire onwards. It takes a bit of a funny turn, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's sometimes like when they get, because this is something I think we'll discuss coming up to the later albums in the 80s, is that there's always this kind of like push-pull between, their kind of like love of some of the more complex arrangements. It's like, again, that blueprint I was saying about, and the first couple of albums, they are very much a band of, and now a tempo change, or now an irrelevant intro. You know what I mean? But it's all part of their sound. It's all great, But
the thing is as well, they were touring. They'd write an album for 2 months. They go on tour for 9 months, and they come. I mean, their workload was insane.
Oh, it's insane. Yeah, absolutely. But then they also had just absolutely killer pop songs, like The Trooper. The Trooper is an amazing pop song.
They were Spice Girls level songwriting.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
We'll talk about it as we go on. I mean, I think as a pop band and the songwriting pop stuff just gets better and better as they go on. Right, so we've done Peace of Mind, which is brilliant. It's a fantastic record. So we're on to Power Slave. So we're off to Egypt. And just to once again, another thing about the album artwork, each album has got absolutely killer artwork. I mean, as a boy who was like 14, 15, and pore over Iron Maiden. I used to read them like a novel, the album cover. And I love the way each album and all the associated singles have the same theme. They have got, they have an Eddie for that album, and they've got an Eddie, so this one is a great record as well. Aces High is such a brilliant song.
Brilliant.
Awesome. 2 Minutes to Midnight as well. But it's got a bit of a mid-album dip. So Lost for Words Flash is okay. Flash of the Blade and the Duelists, it's we know Bruce likes a bit of fencing. I'm not really sure what Back in the Village is all about, to be honest.
That's another weird one. Actually, I'm going to look at the lyrics of that. Well,
Back in the Village.
I think it's about PTSD.
Right.
I think because it's talking about war,
but
and then it talks about
And the last two are fantastic. Power Slaves, all that.
Yeah. I've just looked at. I'm gonna say back in the videos about PTSD. That's correct us if we're wrong.
That stuff. I love all that. The Egyptian stuff and all the when the extra tracks is quite interesting. There's a Nectar cover, who are a very quite obscure prog rock band.
Right.
So Steve Harris is a progger. I mean, he like basically if you mix UFO and a prog band and like Nectar or Rush or something like that, that's kind of if you put UFO's Gallop onto prog arrangements. So Power Slave is a fantastic record. Love that song. Rhyme the Ancient Mariner as well with the the middle section of that is quite Chill in the Grave, but I mean it's a fantastic middle section. And I mean Rhyme the Ancient Mariner was one of the first Maiden songs I remember I heard the Lucasade advert, and Rhyme the Ancient Mariner was in that Arena heavy metal documentary.
It was. I tell you what it was as well. That a lot of these songs, I first kind of, even though I've probably heard them on the album, I kind of fell in love with them when the Live After Death video. Yeah.
I mean, this is
when it was accompanied by the visuals and like seeing the band doing it. That was like wow.
So we'll go on to Live After Death now, because you can't really talk about Maiden in the 80s without mentioning Live After Death. I mean, it's everything Maiden. Well, this and the Live in Made in England album. Kind of everything that's great about Maiden. I had both these on VHS cassette. Live After Death is it's massively aspirational for 14-year-old boys. They want to be on this massive stage with these cool, stage backdrops that go out as zombie monsters. I mean, it's everything for a 14, 15-year-old to be into.
Absolutely,
And the whole thing of them, the Live After Death tour was just was it 4 nights in front of 20,000 people in stadium in America. So it's just Long Beach. So 2 nights in Long Beach Arena, so it's 20,000 people a night, I think. So it was a huge thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I'd say as well that watching Live After Death, because I mean that was the first time we kind of see, obviously, being the age we were and where we're from, we didn't have the opportunity to see them live up till that point. And so seeing them play was on this video was amazing. And also made you realise that Bruce Dickinson is the master of what to do in the instrumental sections of songs.
Yeah,
as a singer, he just finds things to do. Wave a flag.
He's massively entertaining.
Swing your microphone around. Go and talk to the audience, whilst the rest of the band are doing their thing.
Or put Dave Murray on your shoulders. That's brilliant. But I mean, every track on this one's, to be honest, if I'm going to listen to one Maiden album, quite often I'll put Live After Death on it. And the precision of the playing, I mean, apparently there was no overdubs, apparently. I don't know how true that was, but I mean, if that's true, they were incredible at that point. I mean, they were.
Yeah.
And the bits in the video, Eddie comes out and the big Eddie with the fireworks, Steve Harris with his legs spread as he jumps off the thing in the album.
That's amazing, yeah.
And there's Bruce Dickinson doing that in the inside.
That picture of Steve Harris doing the old jump off the thing. That is literally pretty much the whole reason I play an instrument. Because you open the gatefold, see that as like 13 years old or whatever, and you go, "Yep, I'm in."
But yeah, it's fantastic. And the version of, there's a few weird things. The version of Phantom of the Opera on there with Bruce singing, which is quite odd. But yeah, it's the probably one of the best live albums ever made by anybody, I think.
Oh, it's stunning because it's just the hit rate. I mean, they're a band that's like. Oh, so what year was Live After Death?
85?
85, something like that. Yeah. So they're a band that's been going like 5 or 6 years, and they've got enough material.
Recording wise, I mean, they'd done 4 years of pubs before that, but
true. Yeah.
The actual, as a recorded band, this is their 5th year, and they've gone from playing in pubs to headlining in front of tens of thousands of people all over the world. Playing the Rock in Rio Festival, playing that massive festival. Yeah, they were huge. But like you say, the hit rate is insane. How many good tracks? There's not. Looking at the track listing for this, there's not a weak track on there.
No, it's amazing.
I'm not keen on that one. Literally everything's a bang. It's just wow. You know what I mean? There's not a. There's the base. They've took all the stuff that's really good and took everything to. There's not a bad track on there as far as I can see.
Yeah, exactly.
When probably the worst one is "Die Your Boots On," which is absolutely brilliant.
Well, exactly. That's saying something, isn't it?
But that's if Dio had written that. Much as I love Roy James Dio's voice, but that would be one of the best Dio tracks if Dio had written that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on to Somewhere in Time. So one of the things I really like about Maiden is they definitely moved to a different era with this. So it's got a few slightly poppier. It's got a few guitar synthesizers on it.
Are they guitar synths?
Yeah, there's no keyboard on it. It's all guitar synths. Yeah. The album cover's brilliant. I used to spend, once again, it's super detailed, isn't it?
Yeah.
So much in it. And then you've got, songwriting wise, I think it's a really strong album as well. Wasted Years is probably the one that, Strange Land.
Wasted Years is an amazing pop song.
It really is a great song, isn't it?
What a chorus.
But it's definitely Wasted Years is definitely one of the best ones. Caught Somewhere in Time's great. Sea of Madness has got a great intro riff, and Heaven Can Wait's really good. Lonely So Long Distance Runner's got my favourite Adrian Smith guitar solo on it.
Yeah,
it sounds a bit like Big Country. But a lot of those guitars, it sounds like they've got harmonisers on some of the guitar parts, and
this
a lot more details, and
it's
like rack effects have come in, haven't they?
Yeah, I'd say this is the most, from a sort of like a production point of view, is the most kind of like 80s record. It's when all of a sudden all the guitars have got chorus on them, and there's, like you say, there's a guitar synth, and it's kind of like their sounds moved a little bit with the times, as it were. You know what I mean?
It was the era of buying guitar for the practicing musician and fantasising over buying a fridge-sized guitar rack, wasn't it? Which was, that was completely impractical. You could only use, you never use it anywhere apart from a massive stadium show like Maiden were doing at the time. I love the video of Stranger Strange Land where they're all on that inflatable Eddie.
Oh yeah. I think this has got to be one of the best Eddies as well.
The Eddie is fantastic. I had that one on my bedroom door.
Yeah.
So he had and he was bursting out my bedroom door when I was a teenager. And I love it. It's the Blade Runner Eddie, isn't it?
Yeah, Cyborg Eddie. It's amazing.
Absolutely fantastic. And once again, it's another one where every single singles from the album all had the right theme. But yeah, it's once again you could deja vu, feel like I've been here before.
Yeah, brilliant.
Literal songwriting.
Yeah. Because when I was listening back to their kind of discography over the last few days, sometimes you listen to some stuff and you go, oh my God, that's a really clever metaphor. And then you remember, you go, no, this is literal, isn't it? This is literally about
feel like I've been here before.
What's the song called? It's called Deja Vu. How's the chorus go? Feel like I've been here before.
Alexander the Great, once again, it's not a bad one, but there was a formula creeping in that Steve would write the last song and it would be a very long epic. And there was always that thing, but it got a lot to love, this album. Once again, brilliant stuff, and Adrian Smith and Dave Murray, such fantastic guitarists.
Yeah, love it.
Just a fantastic band. And so we're on to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
Now this, I would say this was kind of like the first Maiden album that I was kind of, I don't know how to describe it. I was there for.
Yeah, so
my age was now like I was there for it.
I remember being in the school hall at Royston Boys School, and people talking about, there was one kid who said he was going to go, I don't know if he was telling the truth, said he was going to go to Donington Monsters of Rock to see the Maiden, Seventh Son tour show, the massive Maiden, Donington show in '88. So I remember this being of the time.
Yeah.
I love this album. I think it's brilliant. It's another one. It's probably, once again, it's one I didn't listen to quite as much as the others when I was a kid, and I really like it now. I like the whole concept thing. I like. It's probably Evil That Men Do is probably their best pop single. I think.
It's the pre-chorus. Love that.
It's got like 3 big hooks, hasn't it? It's got the Clairvoyant's a really great record. Can I Play With Madness is a really great record. They're just the majority of the album's well prog. I mean, it's really prog. I mean, it's all time changes and complex arrangements, lots of linear runs, and I love it. I mean, I suppose this year, like I say, this was our era of Maiden, wasn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely was.
I had a Clairvoyant T-shirt. I had the Maiden England DVD video because this was when it came out. Because after this, they took a year off, didn't they?
That's right. But it was so weird, though, because this, like we're saying, like this was the album that kind of we were there for the release, as it were. But this is a band that we already knew intimately, so it didn't feel like I don't particularly feel like this was the one for us because we were already in. We got all the albums. We knew all the you could hum all the guitar solos.
I remember buying the singles on vinyl, and then they did a thing called the first 10 years or something.
That's right.
With all the double vinyls, and I bought all those. I've still got those at my mum's. Wow. And I had the Evil That Men Do single with Prowler 88. It was on the back. And Prowler was a recorded version of Prowler, and Shroud the Harlot re-recorded on one of the other singles as well. So, for me, it was a formative thing, I suppose. And then by the time Maiden sort of came back after this, metal was progressing really fast at that point. So you had Maiden had sort of come out with Seventh Son, and then Metallica came out with Justice for All, which was kind of their prog album, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Megadeth came out with Rust in Peace, which was their sort of progressive album, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And but I don't know if Maiden were the first band to do that, but that went really, really progressive in the in their sound. You had all that. So Queensryche did Operation Mindcrime, and there was a crossover between sort of heavy metal bands that wanted to be a bit prog, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So and then by the time Maiden came back, and they'd gone back to sort of a more their traditional sound, sort of the early sound again, hadn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is interesting because it's. I mean, what a run! What a run!
Yeah,
one of albums.
One of the best.
That's
one of the best runs of any. One of the best runs of any band, I think.
And how hard you have to work. I mean, they were touring, writing an album. They were, they released an album every 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, but almost virtually every year, and they put Live After Death out between Power Slave and Somewhere in Time, and there was that whole I don't think there's any. Well, I mean, like I say, there were weaker tracks and some of them, but by anybody's standard, they're fantastic records.
Yeah,
and
amazing.
And they'd literally do 2 months in the album, and then a 9-month world tour, and then. I mean, as a band now, you couldn't even imagine what it'd be like to do that, could it? No band is operating like that anymore.
Their work ethic was insane, absolutely insane.
Yeah, I mean, also you could do it. I mean, there wasn't. Even if you wanted to do it, it'd be impossible to do now. I don't think there's that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible to tour like
that. I think they'd already had. They were on top of the pops from pretty much from the beginning, as it were. They're already a popular band.
Yeah.
But Can I Play With Madness and all this, and being able to see a band like Maiden, in the mainstream, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean they were the face of. I mean, if you were to think of heavy metal in the 80s, Maiden were probably the face of an Aussie. Maiden and Aussie probably were the faces of sort of Guns N' Roses and Whitesnake. But those sort of four were the sort of face of metal to people who weren't into metal, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. And
what about, having that thing of and they didn't sound anything like anybody else. And I still don't think it's anyone. They've been ripped off by. I mean, the whole power metal thing's kind of a derivative of Maiden, bands like Halloween and people like that. But I don't think anyone really sounds like. Still, no one's a visionary like Steve Harris is. I mean, Steve Harris he's a one-off. He's come up with this whole bonkers concept.
He plays the heck out of triads.
He even designed the font. The whole thing is from
yeah.
And Eddie and all this thing. The whole thing is just it's never been repeated. No one's ever come close again. And and let's be honest, they struggled to repeat it afterwards as well, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the odd track on the latest stuff that's brilliant, like Wicker Man's fantastic, and there's material that's really good. But what a run! And we love Iron Maiden, don't we?
I can't. I'm not subjective about it.
I don't do say anything negative at all, really, have we?
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Quest for Fire.
What's that?
Quest for Fire, Tamerland.
Quest for Fire, yeah.
Gangland.
What's that?
Gangland,
but mostly, like I say, probably one of the best runs of certainly any heavy metal band, or with a Voivod's run of albums, or that sort of of just brilliant stuff over and over again. Right, are we done, mate?
I think we are.
Lovely.
That was awesome. So, just if you don't own them, go out and buy all of the albums from the 80s that Iron Maiden made.
Yeah.
Get all the singles and the B-sides as well. They're all amazing.
Yeah, they're all great. And Total Eclipse. Listen to Total Eclipse. If you was one Maiden song you've never heard before that you want to be blown away by, Total Eclipse.
Yeah.
B-side, it's very good.
Thanks for watching.
Done. Thanks very much.